Okay. Somehow. Yeah, it's all just, yeah. Yeah.
I hope this is good enough. You probably so. You're glad to be here. I have a bit of a cold, so my voice isn't what it should be. I'm not really bringing my A game, but we'll make it. Hopefully everything will be up clear. Please interrupt me if I'm not understandable in the back of something, where I need to repeat something.
Yeah, this microphone.
The microphone? Yeah, sure. Oh, it's a good idea. Is this working?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, the topic God on the brain. Talking about top-down constraints, like how information streams in the brain sort of impact religious experience. Sort of some things were highlighted in the previous talk, but I think it's roughly a different topic. Just have a look at this one. Painting by Jan van Eyck, Flemish painter who lived and worked not really far from where I grew up, in Belgium, at Flanders. Why do I show this picture? It sort of depicts a vision or an apparition. Like the guy on the right wearing the white robe is a priest. I don't really know the English word for this title, but the painting depicts a sort of a vision or an appearance he had while reading scripture, or you see he's holding a book, he's reading the Bible, and then his mind wanders, so to say, he closes his eyes, and then kind of a vision pops up to his mind with the Virgin Mary, with the infant Jesus, and some other people who I don't know the names of. This really highlights some of the things I will be discussing here. So the priest has a vision, some kind of religious experience, some kind of religious perception, and it seems to be grounded or at least greatly influenced by what he was reading, by certain knowledge he had, or background information that is in his mind, is in his brain. Certain information impacts his perception or his experience. I'm wondering how we should cover this, like in philosophy of religion, or how does that have any impact on assessing these religious experiences. Brief overview of what I'll be talking about. Top-down constraint and perception, where the link with neurosciences, then applying this to religion, and then some epistemological worries. Coming to some different conclusions than the previous speakers, some more positive conclusions on religious experience. So top-down constraints. Broader topic of this conference is neuroscience and religion, or neuroscience and theology. I won't really be discussing brain areas all that much, or nothing from functional MRI scans or something. It's more like how neuroscience sort of reveals how the brain processes information, how we come to hold certain beliefs, how we come to have certain perceptions. Like the way we sense things, experience stuff, and at least be strongly mediated by some things that are going on in the brain. The brain is, of course, the organ that is involved in conscious activity, more so than all other organs. And the brain is also said to house certain kinds of information. How this all happens remains a profound mystery. Like, how is information embedded in neurons? How do neurons shape perception? There remains a lot of work to be done, but there is sufficient grounds to claim that it does. It doesn't really know how in the details. So what are these top-down constraints? What are we talking about? There are certain mediators to perception, mediators to experience. Like, experience is not only bottom-up, like the picture to the right, like our sensory inputs sort of translate into representations, which then translate into a certain conscious experience. It's that as well, but there's also like a level coming from a higher up, top down. Certain things, background beliefs, concepts, other things you know, these sort of shape what we experience. I'll just skip one ahead. Like, for example, look at this. The sensory input is reflections from light, from clouds, other stuff that might be coming to your eye, maybe you hear or smell something as well. But your mind sort of adds an additional layer, sort of interprets what you see. Like, if you have a certain understanding of religious concept, it wouldn't be hard to see an angel in there, or some other religious figure. This isn't really given in the sensory input. Sort of the mind or the background information sort of maps on or adds to the sensory input. The brain or the mind, not really being very consistent with my terminology here, uses pre-existing concepts, ideas, and knowledge to comprehend sensory input. And this isn't like it's immediate. It's not like you have sensory input, now hang on, what is this? I'm thinking, oh, it's an angel. No, it happens instantaneous. It's not like we're first seeing some vague patterns and only then the angel, we see it immediately, at least most people do. Sort of resembles a much older idea, like some of you will recognize the Paloutzian categories here. Like the idea that there are certain elements, concepts in our mind that sort of shape the way we perceive things, at least goes back to concepts that are probably much older. That we're not just really rehashing what constitutes the senses or really just translating that. Now our mind has an active role. It's a fairly old idea. It's sort of, it goes beyond these fixed categories like Kant was arguing about, but also like more individual different categories or different expectations. Like my background information might be different than yours. Someone growing up halfway across the world, maybe he or she won't see an angel, whereas we growing up here are easier to do so as well, or easier to do see an angel there. So it's not just things that are shared by all humans or by most humans. There's also context, maybe cultural context, religious context. There's social learning. My expectations, what I expect to see might be different than yours. It might just be context dependent, like in certain religious settings I might expect to see something like an angel or more easier to expect it than in others. And there's also like personal experience. If you've had experiences in the past of a certain thing, you're more likely to have it again. These top-down constraints, like the way certain pieces of information in your mind influence perception, are likely stronger when the sensory input is not very clear. Like for standalone, very clear sensory input, like seeing someone you know well, it's not real need to add much top-down constraints. Also, when something is very clearly visible, then there's not much need to really interpret what it is or to have additional information within. When the sensory input is vague, these top-down constraints are much stronger, have a lot more influence. Like on the right, a lot of you will recognize it, these are the Rorschach pictures. Vague things that not really about anything. And they ask patients to see what they see in there, how they see these pictures. And that would reveal something of their mindset, of what they believe of a certain state they're in. It reveals, in other words, their background information, or what's really on their mind. Other ambiguous information might be like the stuff you see in low light conditions when it's dark outside, something in the periphery of your visual field, when you're not focusing, and then, did I see that? What did I see? I don't know. And then the top-down constraints take it to the next level. So in these vague situations, top-down constraints have a lot more influence, a lot more reach on perception. There are radical forms, like very few people will deny that these top-down constraints exist, that there is this role of background information on perception, at least in some cases. Most will also agree that it's stronger in these ambiguous situations where the sensory input isn't very clear. But there are radical forms. Some will claim that all perception is top-down regulated or top-down constraints. That the influence from bottom-up perception is very, very limited. Like one such radical account is predictive processing, which is gaining a lot of traction in cognition, in the theories of cognition. People like Hans-Ferdinand, for example, they claim that all perception is fundamentally shaped by top-down constraints. They say you have a sort of internal model of the world with everything we may expect to find, including the likeliness of when we'll encounter something. To give you a crude example, when you're walking a forest, you expect to see trees, so it's very likely that you see trees. This internal model sort of feeds perception and make it easier to see things that are likely to be perceived. Things that are unlikely to perceive are less fed by these other constraints. There is a role for sensory inputs, like only in revising this internal model. It might be that the internal model sort of lends the expectation that you see something, but there's a mismatch with the sensory input. For example, I walk through the forest, I expect to see trees, a lot of liveliness, and I will encounter trees, but then all of a sudden I don't see them. There was a big construction project and all the trees have been cut down. My expectations don't match sensory inputs. Then my internal model will get revised, and future perceptions will rely on a new internal model. This relies on the free energy principle that I will explain this for now. It's not really needed for this presentation. So yeah, these are the radical forms. What does this mean for religious perception? Like very